What's up everybody? Today we're going to take a pattern I made and make a leather strapping kit for some Lamellar armor. You can find this pattern as well as other patterns and artwork on my Etsy shop. There's a link right here. You can also find all that same stuff on my Patreon when I first release it for a limited time. And hey, if you want to help support the channel even more, I've started designing some shirts. This is one of them here. So check that out. I made this pattern a while ago, and so it's been on my Etsy for quite some time, but I finally decided to put together a video for it for you guys. The upper chest piece that I'm cutting out here should be expanded or contracted depending on the width of the front of your Lamellar or armor that you're attaching it to. I would keep all of the leather in the 6 to 8 ounce range. And the holes are going to be 1/8 inch for the rivets, and 5/32 inch for all of your strap holes or lacing holes, and I'm using Paracord for this example. The pattern itself is pretty straightforward. There's not a lot of complexity to it. It's more single pieces mounted to the Lamellar itself. There's a mistake I made, so I'm just showing you guys. There's not two of those, but they're mirrored, so they can go on the shoulder straps. You can see the indent there on that strap. That's so when you're going around a curved D-ring, it sits better. Now this kit is made so that you can adjust the holes depending on what kind of Lamellar you're using or armor you're using. It doesn't have to be Lamellar, but this is just generally what I've used this pattern for. I'm going to leave these lacing holes off of the finished piece today. Whoever decides to pick up this piece from my Etsy shop, they can just add their own holes depending on what kind of Lamellar or armor in general they have. I get most of my leather and supplies from LONSDALE leather. You can see the link right here, or you can check the description of this video for a direct link to their website. I was using a scratch awl at first to do this pattern. I decided just to do it with a marker since I'm beveling all the edges anyways. All that marker will disappear when I'm done. The leather I'm using for this project is a 6 to 7 ounce burgundy latigo. It's rugged, weather resistant, sweat resistant. I think it works really well on projects like this. You don't need a strap-in punch to do these. Obviously you can just cut them with your knife, but I've got a nice strap-in punch, so I might as well use it. The buckles for this project are 3/4 inch for the shoulders, 2 of them, and then 5/8 inch for the side straps, 4 of those. Here I'm cutting some keepers. Now I'm going to cut strips. I'm going to thin them down with my bench skiver. You can use a hand skiver if you want. And then I'm going to fold them around the strap and buckle area of my piece to get the right size and staple them together with my mini stapler. Now, my camera decided to eat the footage of me making these little keepers. I've got other videos where it shows me making them. I'll try and remember to put a link here for you guys. Ask me down below if I haven't. It's a pretty straightforward process, and if you don't have a little stapler, you can quite easily punch 2 holes and stitch your keepers together. Or you can use a center bar buckle where you don't need keepers, but I think a center bar buckle looks a little less period, so I try and use heel bar buckles all the time. Some people may or may not want to use these little parts that I put around the bottom of my Lamellar, but I figure that since they're so uniform, I will just cut a belt strip and then cut them all out individually really quick. I do 10 of them here. We're not going to go through all of it because that's a big waste of time, and I'm sure your time is just as valuable as mine. So once we got all these cut out, we're going to bevel everything. I'm using a deluxe craft tool beveler. It's a number 1, which kind of throws me off because all the regular bevelers that aren't pro or deluxe, a number 1 is usually really tiny. So this is almost a 3 really. I would use a 2 or a 3 if I was doing these with a less expensive beveler. I do like it though, gliding pretty smooth. I've got the fine one that you can see me using here in a bit. I'll slowly replace all my bevelers in my kit with these, I think. I do really like them. I think they'll be a little harder to sharpen, but that's okay. So once we get to the holes, we're using the 5/32, as I mentioned before, for our belt strapping holes, and we're using the 5/32 for any lacing holes. Now again, I'm not punching the lacing holes in this project because it's going to vary depending on who picks it up, but just so you have a good idea of what you should be using if you're using paracord to lace your project together. All the other holes for rivets will be 1/8 because I use 1/8 dome head brass rivets. So I'll put this strapping kit on my Etsy shop for you guys, and also you can check out my Patreon to get the pattern for a limited time, but it'll always be on my Etsy shop. I haven't really pushed my Patreon a ton, but there's a few people on it that have realized what a good deal it is, so make sure you check that out if you are interested in getting multiple patterns a month, multiple pieces of artwork a month, for a nominal fee. Little tip for you guys, if you're going to get an oblong punch, you can get a smaller one and then use it to make bigger holes, or if you really want to, you could punch 2 holes with a rotary punch or a drive punch and then cut your lines to get your oblong. So you can see here I'm extending my oblong to make sure it's got enough space, because my big one was too big and my small one was too small. So with dyeing, just make sure that your daubers are not overloaded with dye. You don't want it to just suddenly pool and go all over your piece. When you burnish the edges of your leather, almost always it's going to end up darker, so I like that contrast anyways, so I add to it by using a dark brown dye on the edge of this burgundy. I think the contrast turned out really nice. So it's time to think about burnishing. I use wax, people use water, soap, saddle soap, glycerin. I just use wax. It always works for me, so eventually I'll probably try something else, but for now I use wax. Get a good coat on the edge. Try not to get it all over the front. You can buff it off with a cloth later, but you don't need to overdo it. Just get a nice coat on there. Once we've done that, we've got a few tools. These are the ones that I have kicking around the shop that can be used for hand burnishing. I don't really use the one on the right at all, I just never have. This one's great, as is the black bone folder. So, just do a quick little example for you guys. And then I'm going to go hit everything with my motorized one. I've got 2 wheels on this now, so I've got one side that's brown and one side that's black. In theory, I guess the one side that's brown is everything else, and the black side is just for black. It'll get a nice smooth finish. Just make sure you don't overdo it. You don't want to cook all your edges. Yeah, nice and smooth. So we're going to go through all of our pieces here. I'm not going to show everything, but I'm just going to make sure they're all slick. And once that's done, we're going to move on to doing a little buff on the top of all these pieces, because there's going to probably be a little bit of marking from your burnisher, or maybe a little bit of wax residue that you want to get rid of. So I just go over everything really quickly, specifically around the edges, with a buffing cloth after I've done all this stuff. It's usually not too bad, it'll go pretty quick. Now once we've done this, I want to skive down the shoulder strap part of this kit. I could have done it before I beveled it, didn't really matter. So I'm just using my bench skiver to take a little bit off so it folds nicer. I didn't do this on any of the buckle straps. I guess I could have. They seemed fine though. This was more important because it's going to be a little awkward riveting it with brass dome heads. If you're using something like a copper washer that's got a taper and a burr that kind of locks in place, these will be really easy to rivet. But since I decide to rivet everything with dome head brass rivets that don't have washers that hug the shaft of the rivet, it can be a little awkward at times unless you make sure that it is nicely skived down. Then I just go around the edge really quick with this fine deluxe beveler. It's not even a number rating, it's just called fine from Craft Tool. And yeah, that's about it. We're gonna snip our rivet heads, peen everything awkwardly. There's a bunch of different techniques you can use if you're having trouble making sure that you're able to peen. One of them is to use masking tape. You can put masking tape right over the shank of the rivet and hold the burr in place while you hammer away. You can use a little bit of spit to hopefully hold it, a little bit of glue to hopefully hold it. You can use a very small pointed tool like a stitching awl or some kind of stylus to hold it down. Occasionally I'll even use the rivet setter there to just press the burr down to make sure it's not flaring up. So here I am just putting some tape on there, and then you just hammer over the tape until the tape has done its job, and then you remove the tape. Again, this entire process would be a lot easier if you're just using copper rivets with burrs. Well, there you have it. 4 side straps, shoulder straps, front plate, some dangly bottom bits for decoration. I think it turns out pretty nice. You could even carve a bunch of this if you wanted to, put some artwork on it, add some more brass to those little bottom row of leather, all sorts of things you can do. Now I'm going to show you how I put it on my Lamellar. Here's my personal suit. You can see all the same pieces on it. It's all laced together, so if you look at the pattern, you can see where those lacing holes line up with the brass plates and the paracord itself. These Burka plates have 2 holes at one end, and so they line up with my pattern. If you're using different Lamellar, obviously you use different holes. You can see how easy it is here to lace this together. Just time consuming is all it is. There's not even any knots. It's just woven back through itself to hold it in place. When I originally did this style of armor, I would do paracord all the way through for the side straps. And now when I do it, I would lace all the way up to the spot where you put these side straps, lace the side straps on with their own individual set of paracord, and then continue on with the rest of the Lamellar. That's because the leather is definitely going to give out way before the metal does, and you want to easily be able to pull those straps off and put new ones on if you need to do that. You can also see here that there is a leather strip down the middle of the front and back of this suit. That's to make it flexible when you put a belt around it, so that you can bend, sit, and move around without any interference from the plates. I didn't really include this because it's a strip of leather. Belts vary, so cut a strip of leather, punch a bunch of holes, and lace your plates to it. I should definitely give a shout out to a few people and link them in the description. I got these plates from Palantir Trim. They are brass plates from Palantir Trim. The little flowery bits and the buckles are from Bronze Hammer, so you can have a look at that. Both those guys will be linked in the description of my video. Check out their stuff, it's pretty awesome. This design can be used on all sorts of different Lamellar. It just has to have the holes adjusted depending on what kind of hole pattern you have. You can put it on some different kinds of armor, or maybe it gives you ideas for different projects. If you enjoyed the video or enjoy what I do at all, hit the like button. It really helps the channel out. And obviously hit the notification button if you want to make sure you're informed whenever I release a new video, which is also super important. And until next time, keep on being creative in whatever it is you do.